here today with Shappi Khorsandi. Shappi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I survived the storm. That's all we can say.
Yeah, I was out in the street. My neighbour saw me like in a bush picking up recycling because it was recycling day yesterday, and my next door
Perfect.
neighbour's a very elderly lady, and hers just went flying,
Oh,
and I
geez.
went to pick it all up.
That must be lovely.
It was deeply glamorous. It was, it was
The
really
joy.
reaching into people's. And I thought all my neighbours on their Ring doorbells, they're going to have me creeping into their front gardens and picking up Muller lights and all that kind of stuff. But no, we're here. It's good. We all survived.
It's good. That's amazing. Listen, let me. Comedian, advocate for human rights. Tell me how you balance that up. Tell me how you kind of.
Well, I mean, I don't like humans all that much. No, I think when you become a comedian, you get asked to do a lot of stuff. And we're very lucky in that we get to meaningfully support things that we believe in, because when you
Mm,
put on a benefit gig, a comedy night to raise money for a cause or a charity, or lend a voice to something that the government perhaps isn't focusing on, it's something that you can do and you get a lot of kudos for it, but actually it's really basic. It's like the very least you can do. So I haven't dedicated my life um, to it, but I
mm,
did realize very early on that this job also means that you can just sort of step out the shadows
yeah.
occasionally and lend a
But then,
voice.
then when you're then back into the comedian role kind of, and you're performing, how do you know what the acceptable line is? Kind of.
So I think that the mistake that I think happens sometimes with when people are talking about comedy is comedy and humor. It's very different. Something being serious
Mm,
is very different to being solemn. So you can talk about a serious subject and be funny with humor, but it's not going to be solemn. But what you're saying can be as impactful. So it's sometimes people go, how can you joke about something so serious? It goes, well, it is because it's serious. I can joke about it, or I can talk about it in a humorous way. And as
mm,
for where I draw the line, I think everyone's always got a personal line. For me, it's would if I'm talking about a group of people, say, would I be able to do this joke if they're in the front row? Um, if this joke offends people, do I care? Do I
mm,
mean it? Was it my intention? So sometimes with stand up, you can't rehearse it in your bedroom, right? You can't rehearse it. You can't, there's no sort of group that you can go to going, guys, this offensive. You can talk to your friends, you talk to other comics,
yeah.
but ultimately it's in the here and now of a live performance where you know if it's landed or not. And when you're still trying, to find your voice, you can really mess up, and you have to take the hits. You have to take it on the chin and make apologies and reparations if it hurts you that you've hurt people, because you can. Like, somebody wrote to me yesterday and
Yeah.
said, you do speaking about ADHD, but around, I mean, this was around 6 years ago, you did a gig and I was crocheting, she said, and you called me out for crocheting in the middle of a gig. And now I found out that I have anxiety and ADHD, and my doing something with my hands was my way of concentrating, and it stayed with me that you called me out. And this was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And this had been ruminating in her mind. So I wrote back immediately, because I too have ADHD, and I was like, I need to sort this out. And I said to her that, well, I think we all have come a long way in understanding more about that kind of neurodivergence, and no one should have to explain themselves so publicly. And I'm really sorry I put you in that position, but just so you know, I have way more awareness now, and that wouldn't happen today. And She wrote me the most beautiful message back.
Mm.
And that was significant to me because for me, I never want anyone to go away from a gig that I've done feeling that they have been made to feel uncomfortable in some way.
And does that weight of responsibility bear on you? Because that seems to me like kind of you are dealing with people and you don't know who the audience is or anything like that. Therefore, kind of, but at the same time, as a comedian, you are your role is to spark emotion. So there must be that element of responsibility over the whole thing.
Well, I think my responsibility is to be truthful. So if I truthfully dislike racists and there's a
Mm.
racist in the audience that gets offended, then I won't be sending them a nice email apologizing. But if truthfully I feel that for me it's about communication, right? And it's about finding common ground with people where you can play. And I don't need them to vote the same as me. I don't need them to have the same opinions on everything as me. But as human beings, making that connection in that moment where we trust each other, that's the sweet spot, right? So for me, it's like when you learn to drive and you try and find the bites, and how difficult it is when you
Mm.
first start to drive to find the bite, and you stall and you stall and then you find it and you cruise, and that's what it's like. But you have to accept that sometimes you will stall.
Yeah. And can I ask kind of slightly different but same sort of thing? One of the interesting observations I had from a speaker a number of years ago was about the fact that they'd had to adjust their reaction to a room by the fact that for many years it was like if someone was looking at their phone, they thought they weren't interested in them. But then they realised that actually that person these days might be looking at their phone because they're tweeting about them or doing kind of some social activity about them, and therefore it's kind of a positive affirmation to them. Have audiences adjusted for you, and have you had to react differently, kind of as to when you're judging whether it's working and going well or not when you're on stage?
If it's at a comedy club and someone's on their phone, no. That's the same as going to that. If it's a comedy club, I
Mm.
think it's disrespectful because you wouldn't go and watch a play and be on your
Absolutely.
phone, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that, come on, guys, it's not high art, but it's my art form. So if it's at a
Yeah.
comedy club, that's a different story to if it's a speaking engagement at a company or about a specific topic and people have come to hear me about a specific topic. In that
Mm.
environment, I understand this is not my house. This is not my gig. This is something
Mm.
that we are all there to share. And these days, people are tweeting about things. They are live tweeting or on social media, talking about things. And I accept that as part of my job in the world of speaking.
Mm.
I think it is a different kettle of fish. And also, you can tell if someone's idling on their phone, but people don't tend to do that in a work environment when when I'm speaking. I can sense. Do you know what it's a bit like? I don't know if you've ever done jury service, but there are people
No.
in court that are taking notes while
Mm.
everyone's speaking, and you never think they're not completely engaged with what's going on. For all I know, they're all doing Wordle, but I think that I get a real sense of the concentration and whether I've got an audience or not. When I'm speaking, it's a very different a very different connection to a stand-up comedy
Mm.
club because I have much more of a linear journey that I'm going on with what I'm saying, and then it always, if I ever have any doubts, it always comes out in the Q&A that I'd been wrong, because in the Q&A everyone comes to life. And I have to admit that when I do speaking engagements, it's the Q&As that I enjoy the most, and I'm able to connect in a way that really excites me, because it's a conversation then,
Yes.
It feels much more like a conversation, and people, if anything, they're more respectful when I'm doing a speaking engagement, to the point that I go, guys, you can laugh, you can sort of, you can
Yeah.
heckle even, yeah, they're very different, but ultimately it's about connection. And I've worked out when I've got the bite.
Mm. And do you get a different for yourself? Do you get a different buzz, a different kind of feeling afterwards between when you're speaking and when you're performing? If that makes sense.
Um, yes, because when I'm performing, it's everyone's night out. It's their night
Mm.
out, and I cannot I cannot stay and get deeper in a more serious way when I'm speaking. A lot of the time when I'm speaking, it comes from uh, a deeper place for me, because I talk about ADHD, I talk about diversity and inclusion. But when I do talk about those things, particularly diversity and inclusion, I know that I've got a responsibility to make people relax and not
Mm.
think I'm gonna be up there telling them off in some way, or spending my time up there talking about how I have suffered as a person of color. um, I I make my diversity and inclusion talks very inclusive, and I'm very
Right.
self-deprecating. Do I'm very self-deprecating. I point out unconscious biases that I have. I point out that, look, just because you're white, don't think you're the only person that has that slightly racist relative that you have to hide away from other people. I do find that I have to get the people in the room to a place where we trust each other. We trust
Right.
that this is no different to talking about sexism,
Yeah.
right? And I make sure that in my talks, I bestow on the audience this trust that I know that you are all here for the same reason, that we all want to communicate better, and and we think the best of one another, and we make mistakes, and that's okay. And if there are mistakes, there's always reparation that can be made
Mm.
within a workplace. And I talk more about my own mistakes than anything else, I think. And that makes me feel, I can feel the tension in the room subside
Yeah.
when I do that.
Brilliant. Shappi, listen, I think it was genuinely fascinating. Thank you so much indeed. It's been lovely speaking.
Lovely to speak to you.